Hi, I'm Daniel Lucas, and welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years, and today I have my special guest. He's the author of several books, no other than Mr. Dalla Hogan, or the pen name D.H. Rosenberg. Welcome to Book 101, Mr. Dalla, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Hi, Daniel, and everybody who's listening. I'm a retired science teacher, and I started to write about 10 years ago. Um, Initially with short stories. I mainly write in the science fiction and supernatural genre, sometimes crossing over the two. And my latest book is entitled Six Temptations of Seduction. It contains six short novellas around the 10 to 15,000 word length for each one. What was different this time? I've been spending a year or last year or so playing around with AI art or generative art work. And when I'm writing, I like to visualize the scenes, the characters, and you always have used words to bring about those descriptions. But in my mind's eye, I have images. And in the latest book, I decided I wanted to see if I could do something where I could actually generate some of those images. I know for digital artists, this is a sort of a bit of a controversial issue, but this book does contain, including covers, somewhere in the region of just under 100 images. And it really financially would have been a very, very expensive on my part to have tried to find a digital artist and then have to explain in detail what I wanted with each image. So this is a very much my own home production within that. Um, Daniel, did you want to guide me or would you like me to continue?
Yes, thank you for sharing your talents to the world, Mr. Dahlia. And Mr. Dahlia, what was the process like for Six Temptation of Seduction?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
What was the process like
The
for
process
Six Temptations?
um, within the idea behind this was to look at the taking characters, and throughout our lives, there are temptations that are placed in front of us. There are also things that can seduce us, and this is not sort of a sexual seduction, but people want something or they see something or they have an idea and they're drawn in almost sometimes obsessively to reach a certain goal or have a certain satisfaction from possession of a certain item or a certain person in some cases. So the stories were based around that. Of the six, I would say five are definitely of a supernatural element. One is not really got anything sort of supernatural within it, but it is again, there was a duality of this where two people both wanted a particular outcome. And quite an interesting one, I think. There's a conflict that occurs in what they wanted. Anyway, I'll say more about that later. What I would like to say, the very first story in this book is called The Beauty of Moss and Lichen, or lichen, depending on whether you like your tomatoes or your tomatoes. And this um, is currently free to buy today. The novel contains six stories. It's available as a complete book. Because of the amount of artwork in it, it's data heavy. So it's a little bit expensive, or more expensive to buy as a Kindle book, and certainly as a paperback. I don't know if there's video on this, but this is the paperback version of that. It's printed on high quality paper. Unfortunately, it does cost a lot to print a copy of that one. The first story, though, The Beauty of Moss and Lichen, as I say, is currently free at the moment to purchase on Kindle. It's D.H. Rosenberg as an author, and it's a story of a slightly sad young man who is brought up by his mother. His mother dies, and then, quite as a surprise, he finds that, or discovers, he has a father who comes from a background of being an aristocrat, was actually a lord, and he's left an inheritance of a house. And eventually he manages to move up to this house with his girlfriend, and there he starts to see this mysterious woman coming from the woods behind the house, and he becomes obsessed by her beauty. And this leads him onto a path where he must meet and find this woman. At the same time, he discovers dark secrets about his family, a terrible event over 3 centuries ago, something terrible that happened in the woods. And without giving any plot away, ultimately he is tempted to follow the woman, the mysterious woman, into the woods. And there, a terrible, terrible fate befalls on him. So I think that's enough of that one.
So how did you come up with the
Trying to tempt
title of
you.
Six
If you do
Temptation?
download a free copy of that today, it is available today for free. It's just that one story, The Beauty of Moss and Lichen, and you enjoy it. Please leave some sort of review or even a rating. It's really, really hard to get reviews and ratings on work currently. That one does have, just at the moment, 1 5-star rating. But there is currently, as yet, not a review of that story. And it has got illustrations through the novel, just to sort of give a little hint and suggestion, maybe enhance a little bit of with your reading. It also saves having to write a lot of descriptive work. I can paintbrush some of the descriptive work if there is then that image there. They are colour images. Obviously on a Kindle, you'll only see them in black and white, but if you read it either through a computer, phone, or you have some sort of pad which has got that you're using that's got colour with the Kindle app on it, you will get the benefit of the full colour on that. Would you like
How
me
did you
to?
come up? Yeah,
Sorry.
Mr. Dollar, how did you come up with the title of your book, Six Temptation of Seduction, or Six
Um,
Temptations of Seduction?
yeah, I was looking at that. There were 3 words running through my mind: temptation, coercion, and seduction, relating or linking around with the stories. And I think, as I said, we can be seduced by so many different things. And the immediate thing that springs to mind is obviously a sexual seduction. But in a way, most of these stories, it's not really related quite to that. Perhaps the last story, that does have a certain sexual and a subtle erotic thread running through it. I'll mention more about that later. But we are constantly under temptation, and our minds have to sort of make a filter, make judgments, avoid, if we can, behaving badly or making wrong moral decisions because of those temptations. So that's really where the title started to form. I played around with a lot of ideas on that, and in the end, that was the one that I felt fitted in with the nature of the particular stories for this particular book.
Did you draw from any personal experiences when you're crafting Six Temptations of Seduction?
Yes, there are maybe some experiences, some feelings that I had, particularly when I was younger, and those are very subliminally placed in some of the events and some of the characters. I must say at this point, I never actually did murder anybody. No mothers or wives were tripped down the stairs or drowned in a swimming pool. But there is, I think, whenever any author writes, you're using people people you've known, or yourself. Certainly does become embroiled in some of the characters and some of the events that take place in the writing.
Did what do you hope readers would take away from your book after they finish reading it?
Um, I think the stories they're all quite different in a way. Some are more for entertainment, I think, and maybe that little bit of element of mystery. But there are also moral messages which are delicately, I think, sewn in. Whether that is something that will affect anybody, it's not for me to say. It will be for the readers to say as to whether they find the messages or the subliminal messages that I have placed within my writing.
Were there any particular authors or books that influenced your writing style?
Um, yes, but a very, very wide range. Because I was a very prolific reader, and I say was. I now maybe only read 10 books a year. I tend to try to look for. I've read quite a few indie books, indie author books, and some of those have been absolutely brilliant. Um, in terms of books that maybe have had some influence into the style of writing, they may be a little bit old-fashioned these days, but I love the works of Thomas Hardy because I could see the characters and the scenes in his writing. Um, D.H. Lawrence, there was an edginess to some of his writing for that particular time. And then, in science fiction terms, I really love Philip K. Dick. There was also Stephen Donaldson, who wrote the Chronicles of Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever. There's obviously Tolkien and the Lord of the Rings, which was sort of an amazing visual in my head fantasy. So when the movie came out by Peter Jackson, I was really surprised at how close it was as to how I'd actually visualized the characters and the scenes. And I thought he did a remarkable job. But yeah, it's just a huge range of people that I've read, and they've
Very
obviously, I
well
think,
said.
yeah. Oh,
Very well said, Mr. Darla. But before we go on, I want to shout out my top 5 countries listening to this podcast. I think top three. Top three, right? Because in Suriname, I got number 3 on the Apple charts in books. Number 8 in Saint Kitts and Nevis in books. Suriname in arts. Number 10 in Suriname in arts. 28 in Saint Kitts and Nevis. And 36 in Ghana. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast, because this podcast is created to empower writers, authors all over the world, like Mr. Darla Hogan. And thank you so much also for those people listening to my Geography 101 in Korea, Egypt, Hungary, Korea. And of course, my Food 101 Indonesia, Philippines, South Africa, Denmark. And thank you so much. Speaking of Food 101, I want to promote my Food 101 merchandise. People, please do purchase one of my merchandise on Food 101 on our fourth season already, people. Fourth season with Chef Alessandro, one of the specialty chef in one of the five-star hotel in downtown Toronto. Name it and we have it, from accessory mag, accessory pouch, apron, bento, lunchbox, and many more. So please do purchase our Food 101 merchandise, available on Etsy and Shopify. So, Mr. Darla, can you share a memorable moment from your writing journey that has significant impact on this book?
Um, that's quite a hard question to answer, because there are 6 different stories, and there are elements of things perhaps in my early 20s. The um, yeah, there is the death of my mother, which and the feelings of that play a part in one particular story. There is, in particular, one story which is my love, which is a sort of misdirected love. And it's about a man who through a picture or a portrait, becomes obsessed with the woman that he sees in this picture, and ultimately he gets to find the picture. But during that time, he's having difficulty with all his early relationships, because he has got this particular obsession about this woman in this picture. And I think there was a period in my early 20s where I had a particular feeling for a person I briefly met, and it did interfere with the early relationships that I had. That I still had these quite strong feelings for somebody who was no longer in my life, and I didn't know where they were. And I think that had an influence on the idea of that particular story, where somebody has got a fixation about a person, and it actually plays a part in disrupting their life, that they can't quite progress and move on because of that. In that particular story, I did alter it very much. So at the end, there is a bit of a shock as to who this mysterious woman in the portrait is. And it is quite a tragic and sad story. And that particular story, it's actually called, sorry, I did the wrong title. It's called 666, and it's nothing to do with the devil. It's to do with the coincidence of numbers relating to the birth date of the main character. So that's one example from some of the stories in the book, where there is a personal past period of my feelings that I've put into the character, but in a totally altered and different story.
So, is there a specific scene or chapter in the Six Temptations of Seduction that holds special meaning to you?
I think there are little separate bits, because it's 6 separate stories. Certainly, I think the end of that story, 666, and the tragedy of what transpires, has it's where I've seen other people. As I said, I had that period in my early 20s where I was, I think, sort of obsessed with a particular person and hoping that anybody I met would somehow emulate that person, but they didn't. But other people I've known have had an obsession about a person and they've never really been able to settle down or be happy because they are obsessed with that person. So that's quite a strong emotional sort of part for me within that particular story. One of the story, when the 13th bell tolls, that's come about as a secondary story to one of the books I wrote, which is the Duke of Hell's Pocket Watch. And I did a lot of research into the Inquisition and the terrible events that occurred in the 13th, 14th, 15th century. And I wanted to develop a short story where one of the characters, who's really quite evil and an inquisitor, is basically gets his just rewards. And it has a sort of a little bit of a religious, supernatural twist on it. But it is a personal view of mine that, unfortunately, it's not pure religion that is to blame, but it's the people who use religion has caused some absolutely horrific suffering throughout history. And it's not necessarily the religion at all that's to blame, but it's the people who use it in a manipulative way for their own personal gain that has brought about a great evil through that.
Very well said, Mr. Dollar. But before we go on, I want to thank Feedspot for being the number 310 best art book podcast, the best art book podcast from thousands of podcasts on the web and ranked by relevancy, authority, social media followers, and freshness. Thank you so much for being the top three on the list. It's a great, great, great privilege. Thank you so much. So, Mr. Dollar, how do you think your book stands out in its genre or category?
I think this one, to me, it's something a little bit different to just being a standard novel or a collection of short stories, but through the artwork that I've put into it, and that artwork has been produced by text, by having to write the description of what I want. And I think I said last week, sometimes to get the images, it's not just a pure description, but the AI art generative or software seems to work quite well sometimes when you put emotional text into the prompts. And that's something that I discovered over the months that I was playing with it. So when I was generating the images for this, you can put in anger, you can put in pain, you can put in sorrow, you can put in people being scared or frightened, and it does respond to those particular prompts to produce images which are close to what's in my mind's eye on the work that I've written. So basically, the work is written, and as I work through, I then try with the AI generative art to produce images at certain points that will hopefully, to me, enhance the experience of the reader. And sometimes when the image, I've been really pleased with an image, but I've then had to make a slight edit to the text or to the actual written work to maybe adjust that in a subtle way to fit the image, which was quite an interesting experience along the way in terms of writing and then editing and formatting this particular book or novel. As I say, it's a collection of 6 quite different stories.
What do you think uh, the genre of this book?
I would say mainly, I would say supernatural. 5 of the stories, there is an element. So in the first story, The Beauty of Moss and Lichen, it's almost an ancient spirit that is gaining a retribution for a terrible past deed. The second story, Sugar is Sour, is not a supernatural story. It's a bit of a mystery, almost bordering on a sort of a crime one, but also about relationships and people's needs and desperation, with a slightly sordid element to it. The third story, 666, is again it's a supernatural one, but there is something unexplained about that. The mysterious picture. The picture was actually painted for the main character 20 years before he was born. Just to give a little hint on that one. Fourth story, Dark Rose, that is also free today as well. So it's Dark Rose from the 6 Temptations of Seduction. That is a bit of a ghost story. It's just set in an English village. It's about a man who's obsessed with trying to beat his neighbour in the village fate rose competition, and he ends up with an injury with his fingers, and this mysterious girl comes along to help him. And then as things develop, and this man, he's got a really nasty neighbour that he doesn't like, who's always beats him in the competition. The girl disappears, and as he begins to investigate, secrets from something that happened 70 years earlier start to unfold, and ultimately there is a retribution that takes place. The fifth story, When the 13th Bell Tolls, is related to terrible events in the Inquisition, and Raoul, the Inquisitor, basically comes to, after burning a woman who admits she is a witch and sleeps with the devil every night, she lays a curse on him so that when he hears a bell tolled 13 times, he will enter an eternal damnation. And ultimately, a year after, when he is very ill due to a very horrible injury that's inflicted on him by one of the prisoners, and he's slipping into a coma, he hears a bell toll 13 times, and then his fate is sealed. And again, I can't give anything away, but he endures, in a contemporary terms of today, an eternal damnation 700 years after the event. And the last story, Occult, which is O with C-U-L-T, but with the it's again a supernatural dark fantasy, and this is a man who basically has a dominant mother and a dominant wife. He actually manages to basically dispatch both of them without it being quite an obvious murder, but he arranges for a little accident to occur to each of them. And then he finds he's basically sexually broken. He cannot have a relationship in a normal way, and he can only become excited if he's with a dominant woman. And then he gets a particular message from somebody, and he finds that he's inherited this little shop or antique shop, but there's more to it than that. And there's one particular woman that he meets who leads him into this secret society, and where there are pathways to pleasure, and she teaches him and works him through these different pathways of pleasure. And there is an erotic element to this, but when I write in that way, I tend to it doesn't go into any sort of graphic detail. I use a sort of a parody or something else to deal with it. And anyway, he ends up with a terrible ending.
Very well said, Mr. Dalla. And can you please invite our listeners to support all your books?
My name is Dalla Hogan, but I write under the pen name of D.H. Rosenberg, and I've got a total of about 17 published books on Amazon. If you like some science fiction, I would say it's some of the science fiction is adult reading. The Flawed trilogy is. If you prefer your science fiction to be more of a sort of typical type, there is the Dominant Species, A Dew of Aliens. There is The Rise of the Pawns, which is a slightly Orwellian style book set at the end of this century. I would say the only thing I would say with that is that the AI technology in the last 5 years has virtually caught up with what I was writing in the book at the time. And then in Supernatural, there's the enamoured, which is a contemporary ghost story, but there is a science fiction element in that relating to the ghosts. So they're arranged. My latest novel, though, is an illustrated one. It's The 6 Temptations of Seduction. 6 stories. You can buy the whole book with all 6 stories in it, or each of the 6 stories is also available separately for 99 cents USA price, or 77p, I think, UK price. So if you just wanted a taster, and 2 of those stories are available for free today. There's The Beauty of Moss and Lichen, which is available free to download today, and there's also The Black Rose, which is also free today. I've put those 2 free on specifically for this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dalla, and please support Mr. Dalla Hogan or D.H. Rosenberg, because if you support him, more books to come. So, Mr. Dalla, thank you for your time.
And Daniel, thank you very much.
Welcome, people. See you soon.